One person is dead, 3 others hurt after a shooting at a mall in El Paso, Texas happened last night. Police say the shooting suspects are in custody. That mall, by the way, is next to the Walmart where another mass shooting happened back in 2019, leaving 23 people dead. Now, that shooting in El Paso, the 69th mass shooting in the U.S. this year, according to the Gun Violence Archive, and it's only February 16th. Gun violence clearly a major issue in this country, along with fallout from the January 6th insurrection, a looming debt ceiling deadline, the president calling for bipartisan solutions. But is that possible? So this morning we're getting into these issues from the top. Representative Pramila Jayapal, representing the 7th District, joining us live this morning. Representative, great to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, so let's start with gun violence, unfortunately. The White House declaring victory with a new gun safety law, but it stopped short of an assault weapons ban. Is there anything that can actually be done in Congress to curb gun violence on the street with so many guns already out there?
This is such a big issue, and it's gotten to the place where even as representatives, we're talking to each other about how do we prepare for gun violence? How do we get trained ourselves from colleagues who have had to deal with this in their districts? It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So we are committed to continuing to try to make progress on this issue. It should not be a partisan issue. There is no reason for us to have assault weapons out on the streets. That is not what our founding framers intended in our Constitution. And so we can pass the assault weapons ban in the House. We already have in the last session. The question is, can we pass it in the Senate? It was a big step that we took with some gun safety laws in this last Congress. But you know, it wasn't enough. I mean, there should be these bipartisan initiatives around just making sure that people are licensed to carry guns. I mean, there's so many things that could be done, and it's just unfortunate that the NRA continues to oppose every single thing that we put forward, including many of these bipartisan initiatives.
Yeah, they call it a slippery slope. You let one thing pass and then all the gun rights go away, so they say. So one of the enduring images, unfortunately, of January 6th was you and your congressional colleagues huddling in the chamber as that attack was happening. And the House Special Committee investigating January 6th recommended charges against former President Trump. Nothing has come of that. The attack itself has become really a partisan issue. So from your perspective, what is the danger of ignoring what happened on January 6th and since the 2020 election?
This was the most violent assault on the United States Capitol since the War of 1812. This was an insurrection. It was an insurrection that was fueled by the former president. This was an attempt to stay in power despite the results of a free and fair election. That would mean, if we allowed that to stand with no accountability, that would mean we are no longer a democracy. It would mean that it encourages others to do the same thing. We already saw something similar happening in Brazil. Fueled by some of the same people. So we can't allow that to stand. And not to mention, I think, you know, for those of us who serve in Congress and watching these pictures again with me there trapped in the gallery, we go to work to do a job. We should be allowed to do that job. And that's why I'm also suing the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and former President Trump, myself, with other members of Congress, because this is a violation of our responsibility to go and to uphold our jobs.
Is it a bipartisan lawsuit, or is it just Democrats?
Unfortunately, it is not. Now, you know, the January 6th committee, I want to just make sure everybody understands, that was a bipartisan committee, and it did tremendous work with very brave Republicans like Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger being very clear that their responsibility is to make sure that we preserve our democracy. And there's some things that go beyond partisanship. There are some things that are about our fundamental oath that we have sworn to uphold the Constitution.
So the new GOP majority and leadership flexing their muscle on the debt ceiling right now, and they're demanding cuts in exchange for getting that done, namely Medicaid, possibly Social Security, and they're basically playing chicken with the U.S. economy right now. How dug in are they from your perspective right now? And while the president calls for a bipartisan solution, is that even possible?
Well, look, it has always been bipartisan for the debt ceiling to be raised. I mean, we Democrats raised it under Donald Trump because we understand we have to pay our obligations. That's what raising the debt ceiling is about. Conversations about how much we should spend and cutting the deficit are conversations that should be had when we have our appropriations, budget discussions and negotiations. But it's hypocrisy for Republicans to suddenly care about the deficit when under Donald Trump they raised the debt by deficit by $2 trillion with their tax cuts to the wealthiest. Now we're just saying, let's make sure we preserve the U.S. economy, the global economy. People rely on the United States to be able to pay our debts. Raise the debt ceiling. And then if you want to have the conversation about what we do after, great. But we know that Republicans want to cut Social Security and Medicare as their answer. This is not just Rick Scott. This is what the Republican Study Committee recommended in their recommendations for the 2023 budget. So they want to do that. We want to preserve and expand Social Security. And the way to cut the deficit, this is the thing. The deficit is not the debt. Deficit includes both revenues and spending. We think that if you do what President Biden proposed in State of the Union and you raise taxes on billionaires and you quadruple the tax on stock buybacks, then you can raise enormous amounts of money, $350 billion, and that will increase our revenues so that our deficit goes down.
Do you think that's a conversation that can even be had now with new GOP leadership in the House?
Well, I hope so. I don't know, but I do think that the debt ceiling, they're going to be backed into a corner. They don't want to collapse. I hope they don't want to collapse the U.S. economy. Right? And I don't think that they actually have proposals for what to cut because cutting Social Security and Medicare, incredibly unpopular, not the right thing to do. They already backed away from that, as you saw during State of the Union, and yet they keep saying the quiet part aloud. That is what they want to do. That's what they've been proposing all these years. So my hope is that we, first of all, just raise the debt ceiling, clean debt ceiling. Let's just do our obligation. And then secondly, if they want to propose cuts, let's see what those cuts are, because the majority of the federal budget, as you know, the spending is, there's very little that's non-defense discretionary spending. So the real way to do this is to raise revenue. That's what we did. That's why President Biden was able to cut the deficit in the last year, because we raised revenue on the wealthiest corporations, made it fair, or I should say not fair, but more fair, and we invested that into bringing back the economy. 12 million new jobs created, unemployment down to the lowest level in over half a century. That's what drives the economy and helps us to continue the work we need to do to give everyone a shot.
Representative Pramila Jayapal, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.
It is really great to have you. Good chatting with you.
Wonderful to be with you. Thank you.